Dixie here. Today I want to talk to you about the emotional experiences that most thru hikers tend to encounter during their hike of the Appalachian Trail. So for me, it was pretty much like a roller coaster. I had never felt so many experiences, within such a short period of time. I mean, you would just have highs and lows, and one day it was just like, this is so wonderful and I love it, and the next day you're like, this is horrible, it sucks, and I just wish I was in a warm place, and dry and whatever. So I just want to cover some of those things that are pretty much normal for you to experience along the way, and to let you know that it is a very emotional experience. Before I get started, I just want to say that for those of y'all who are fixing to start your thru hikes, it's totally normal to be nervous. For me, I was extremely nervous because I had never been on a backpacking trip. I had never tried out my equipment, and I had not had a job since I was about 14 years old. So it was just a complete change of life for me, and that'll be variable depending on your experience and things like that. But for those of y'all who are fixing to get started, that's completely normal. And I continued to be nervous from like a few months before, and it got increasingly so up until the day of. Which brings me to my first emotional experience, and that is the first step. Whether your first step is actually, going up Springer Mountain or on the approach trail like mine, the first step is the hardest, right? So you've actually gotten out there, like you actually did it. You didn't listen to all your friends who said you were crazy, and there you are taking your first step. In my first video, you can see how nervous and unsure of myself I really was. So it's totally normal to still be doubting yourself even the first night, in Springer Mountain shelter, and just to have that doubt and that, oh my gosh, like what have I done? It's like this winding up of emotions, and then suddenly like, woo, there you are. The next significant emotional point for me was my first stretch of like bad weather, like my first long stretch. And this happened for me in the Smokies. It could be different for you. But I had hail and rain and cold weather, and cold rain for me is like my kryptonite. So I had that for like, it seemed a 3 to 5 day stretch, and everything just seemed soggy, and my clothes weren't drying out well at night. My hiking clothes, of course, I always kept a pair of dry clothes to sleep in. To kind of deal with this mentally, if you are curious, I cover it more in my rain video. You basically just have to keep in mind that the sun will shine again, and that you will have another good day, even if it seems progressively that you're just having horrible days. One of the first high points I experienced on trail was receiving my first act of like selfless kindness. So trail magic. There are wonderful people out there called trail angels that I've talked about before, and for me it was somebody had set up trail magic in the woods, and we're just offering hikers all of this wonderful food that you don't normally get on trail. So imagine you're walking through the forest, you've been cold, you've been rained on, and then suddenly these signs appear offering you, food, like real food, and you're like, what is this? And you kind of wonder, like, why are people being so nice to me for no reason? And then sometimes this also comes in the form of having somebody ask you if you want to stay at their house, you and some of your hiker friends, and do your laundry for the night, and they'll cook you a meal, and all of these things happened to me, and it was just, I just can't explain. Just acts of kindness, random acts of kindness have a way of lifting your spirits even on the worst horribly rainy day. Next on my list is dun dun dun, the Virginia blues. So you hear about the Virginia blues before you ever even step foot on the trail, and it can be a real thing. For me, it was actually the Pennsylvania blues. So I really didn't get the blues until Pennsylvania, but I think that for a lot, the reason the Virginia blues strike is because the trail has kind of lost its newness. You've probably seen your first snake, and you've done your first night hike, and you have your trail legs now. So physically, I mean, it's still a challenge, but it just doesn't seem like anything is necessarily new. Maybe you've been looking forward to trail days, and then you had all of that excitement, and now it's just back to regular trail life. And then a lot of people tell you that Virginia is flat, and you realize when you get to Virginia that it's really not as flat as you thought it was. And then it starts heating up, and so you're hot and sticky and hiking in the middle of the summer, and the bugs have started kind of getting to you. So I think a lot of those things will cause people to kind of feel the blues. But you just have to make an adventure of it. So for me in Virginia, I tried to beat my mileage. Like each day I would say, well, let me see if I can hike half a mile more or a mile more. So I think a way to combat this is just to kind of create the excitement in your life when things get humdrum. I would say the next biggest point of excitement came for me around the 1,000-mile marker to Harper's Ferry, to somewhere around the halfway point. So it was just, realizing like, oh my gosh, like I've actually walked 1,000 miles, kind of like in the Proclaimer song, and I would walk 500 miles and then 500 more, and then you did it. And then you're like, it's gonna take a lot more than somebody walking 1,000 miles to impress me. From about the halfway mile marker until New Hampshire, you know, things are fairly smooth sailing. You have your good days and you have your bad days like normal. But when true tragedy strikes some thru hikers is in the Whites. So the White Mountains in New Hampshire, I knew several hikers that had made it all the way up into that point, and the Whites ended up claiming their thru hike and sending them home. The terrain is very tough. So while you might have been doing, you know, 20 plus miles, you can expect that to be cut nearly in half once you hit the Whites. I had some pretty rough days in the Whites. I won't say I ever really considered quitting, but the Whites can really struggle with you mentally. So if you can hike with somebody to kind of help lift your spirits around that time, I would suggest that, because it's a really good idea. For a lot of people, exiting the Whites is, you know, really exciting. They're happy to be done with the White Mountains, and then they get to the Maine state line and you get pretty excited, you know, yes, like I've crossed into the 14th state and I'm in Maine, right? Because the whole time you tell yourself you're heading from Georgia to Maine, but then you realize you still have 200 plus miles when you get to Maine. So while you think that maybe you would be like really excited and relieved to be in Maine, I mean, to be honest, you're just like faced with the fact that you have 200 plus miles to go, and that can kind of get your spirits down. Southern Maine was actually pretty tough for me. It was my first time being alone for several days stretch. And by alone, I mean like not seeing anybody, and just, you know, camping alone, hiking alone, not having any kind of human interaction, and cell service is kind of low then, so I didn't really get to talk to people a whole lot. My toughest day was definitely in southern Maine, and I can't really explain to you why. I just had these fears of slipping and falling down on rock faces, and I don't know why mentally it was so tough for me, but partially the weather, partially the cold, partially being alone, but southern Maine was rough. The next high point, or very emotional point for me, was probably reaching mile 2100, right about the time I caught my first sighting of Katahdin, and that was such a crazy feeling. I felt relieved to see that there was actually, you know, an end in sight, and to see the thing that I had been working hard towards for the last, you know, 6 months. And sure, part of you, you know, might feel like I did, and kind of sad that the journey is almost over, but it's just like knowing that that the end actually exists, and that you've worked so hard for it, and you've seen so many fall by the wayside and not finish their thru hikes, but you're still there hanging on, you know, one of the 1 in 4 that might actually finish. And then last but not least, there's summit day. And I really wish that I could explain to you what it is like to touch that sign at the end and have your first moment of being an official thru hiker, but it's not something that can really be explained, because, you know, it's almost surreal. You kind of feel like it's not happening, like it's a dream. You feel relief, you feel excitement, elation, you know, and then part of you is worrying, you know, what am I going to do now? Like what is in store for me now? And, you know, every day I've had this goal to work towards for 6 months, and now as soon as I touch this sign, it's over, you know, and then you put your hand on it and it's over. And, you know, it's like, how could I ever top this? How could I ever beat this? And then you'll be potentially crazy like me and decide to do the PCT. So how do you handle the emotional roller coaster that is the Appalachian Trail? You have to know that bad days are going to be followed by good days, that bad experiences on the trail give you grit, they toughen you up, they will boost your confidence in the end.
You gotta take the good days with the bad, and today was kind of a bad one, but that just means that tomorrow can only go up.
And I just always tried to tell myself that, you know, a bad day on the trail is still better than a good day at work. You know, I'm like, I could be at the office working right now. Sure, I would be inside, you know, in climate controlled box, but wow, you know, what an opportunity to change and grow on the Appalachian Trail. And it's really, you know, what you make of it. So just try to harness that mindset, and, you know, if you need to take a break in town to get your mind right, do that. Take a 0 day, and just know that you have this wonderful opportunity in front of you, and don't throw it away by quitting on a bad day. The most gratifying thing I've ever done in my life is complete a thru hike of the Appalachian Trail. And, you know, I really don't think that you can understand how much it allows you to grow until you get out there and do it yourself. But just know that feeling like your emotions are on a roller coaster is totally normal and expected. And, you know, around these times that I've pointed out, it might be even more intense. like camping, get it? Intense. But anyway, I hope that y'all found this helpful, and if you have any questions about, you know, emotions that you might experience out there, or if some of y'all would like to share your most emotional experiences on the trail, feel free to do so in the comments below, and we will see y'all next time.
Okay, so I am here at Amicalola State Park, and there's this nice little compartment overhead, so that's the opening, where you can put like a headlamp.